Hey guys, welcome back. All right. We are still diving into the Declaration of Independence. I want you to watch the brain pop on Thomas Jefferson before you start this video with me. So if you need to stop this and go into that brain pop, I want you to see it first. For our notes today, I'm going to start with John Hancock. So just to kind of review, John Hancock wrote his signature, the biggest, on the Declaration of Independence. And John Hancock did everything in a big way. He spent money lavishly. That means he made it rain dollar bills. Wore lavender suits of silk and satin. Now, I want y'all to think about the pictures that we've seen of people from Revolutionary War times. Lavender is like a light purple. So he was wearing purple suits that were shiny and silky. And he signed his name with a flourish. Heads turned when his bright yellow carriage clattered down the Boston streets. He was one of the richest men in the colonies. Though his father had been a modest clergyman, John inherited his fortune from a wealthy uncle and took over his uncle's trading and smuggling empire. That means they brought goods in and out of the colonies, and if it was smuggled, that means sometimes he did it illegally, which they kind of had to do some of that because of all the taxes with like the Tea Act and things like that. But just imagine this guy, bright yellow carriage, gets out wearing a shiny purple suit and is just spending money everywhere. What a character. I bet he'd be interesting to read about. As president of the Second Continental Congress, John Hancock was the first to sign the Declaration of Independence. He became governor of Massachusetts and served 9 terms as governor of Massachusetts. So he's kind of big in our history. He was in charge of the Continental Congress and he got to sign first, and he signed it big enough for King George to see it without his spectacles, is what he said, or as what history has recorded him saying. So let's take a little note on Mr. John Hancock. All right, so when last we met, we had glued in page 39. All righty. And we've got to mention John Hancock here. All right, let me zoom in for you a little bit. So he was the first to sign the Declaration of Independence. I'm going to give him a little feathered quill. And his quote is, King George can read that without his spectacles. And spectacles, of course, are glasses. If you need to draw you a pair of glasses for Mr. John Hancock, maybe give him a cool hairdo. I always had that little kind of tail of a wig. And then if you have a purple handy, you could put him in a purple suit. Got a purple crown here. I might put a little purple suit, a lavender. So I'm going to go with a light purple, if you can imagine that suit for him. Can't even imagine what people thought as he drove around in his yellow carriage and purple suit. All righty. From the Brain Pop, we're going to take some notes on Thomas Jefferson. Now, the notes about Thomas Jefferson are going to include things he did during this time and also things he did in the future. So we're just kind of taking a snapshot of Thomas Jefferson here, okay? All right. And so this is the information that you would have learned in the Brain Pop that you watched today, okay? So one big thing that he did, he's given credit for writing the Declaration. Okay. I'm going to kind of do a little bubble over here. And I'm going to say first presidency. Because he wasn't our first president. George Washington was our first president. But in the first presidency, he was George Washington's Secretary of State. And if you know the way our government goes, it's president, vice president, Secretary of State. So he was the third in charge during the first presidency. And while he was serving with George Washington, he formed one of the first political parties. You may have heard, especially during election years, Republicans, Democrats. Well, his party was actually called Democratic Republicans. Okay, but that's kind of a big deal to kind of be the founding father of a political party. And that was all during the first presidency. We had our first go at being a country. Got a bubble for the second presidency. In the second presidency, John Adams was our president and Thomas Jefferson was our vice president. So there he is again. And then he is our third president. So the third presidency, Thomas Jefferson is our third president. So he's kind of a big deal to the founding of our country and how it got started. So he's a name to know for sure. One of the cool things and one of the big things that he did as our president is he doubled the size of our country. Up until this point, the colonies, remember, owned up to the Mississippi River. They gained that in the Treaty of Paris. They gained that territory. Great Britain had it after the French and Indian War, and then the colonists got from the Atlantic Ocean to the Mississippi River. That was the size of our country. Well, Thomas Jefferson got the whole middle part of the country from France. He bought it from them, okay? Alrighty, so while president, of course, this isn't during Revolutionary War times. We're just trying to take a snapshot of Thomas Jefferson, okay? But it will come up later on as we go through our story, the Louisiana Purchase, okay? And you would have seen the map on BrainPop increase, okay? And we purchased that from France. It was French territory, Louisiana. King Louis is who it was named after. We bought that from France, that whole middle part of the United States. So we went from just having that East Coast to the East Coast and the whole middle part. It's later on that we gained the West. Alrighty. As part of the Louisiana Purchase, you may have heard about the exploration of Lewis and Clark and their guide. It's pronounced different ways, Sacagawea or Sacagawea. I've heard it pronounced different ways. So we're gonna kind of tag that in with this fact here. So it was Thomas Jefferson that hired Lewis and Clark to explore this new land. So he bought all that land and he said, hey guys, I've got to see what I bought. I don't even know what's out there. So Lewis and Clark went on an expedition to go and explore and bring back different information about what native tribes were out there, what the land looked like, what resources were there, you know, because always looking for what resources are there. And I'm going to put in parentheses below Lewis and Clark, Sacagawea, because we'll be talking about all of this later on in our story. All righty, I hope that you know a little bit more about Thomas Jefferson, our founding father that is connected with the Declaration of Independence, and John Hancock and his connection to the Declaration of Independence. And I hope that you will join me back again later. Do well on the quiz on Friday. See ya.